Michael Blake was born on July 5, 1945, in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, USA. During his early years, Blake's family lived in Texas before moving to Southern California. He began to write while he was at Walker Air Force Base, where he used to write for the base newspaper. He studied journalism at the University of New Mexico, and later he attended film school in Berkeley, California. In the late 1970s, he moved to Los Angeles. Here, he lived on friends' couches or sometimes in his car, and worked odd jobs, earning few dollars. But it was during this period that he produced his first screenplay, entitled The Stacy Nights. The film featured Kevin Costner, who later encouraged him to continue writing and introduced him to key figures in the Hollywood industry. Here, the author wrote his best work, the novel Dances with Wolves, that told the story of the extraordinary transformation of a Union Army hero, Lieutenant John Dunbar, into a Comanche warrior called Dances with Wolves. Despite the value of the message, no one seems willing to bring such story on the screen, especially because of the lack of interest in westerns that was widespread at the time. Costner, however, was fascinated by the plot and immediately decided to make a film adaptation of it. Later, he also wrote other works, including a sequel to Dances with Wolves, titled The Holy Road. He lived with his wife and 3 children on a ranch in Arizona. He passed away a few years ago at the age of 69 after a long illness. The story is set in 1863 during the War of Secession and tells about the life of a Union Army lieutenant, John Dunbar, who, during a battle, despite being wounded, committed a suicidal act that later became heroic, riding against the enemy ranks on horseback, distracting the enemies and ensuring the victory. Later, the lieutenant was allowed to choose his next destination, so John, in love with nature and unspoiled landscapes, chose Fort Sedgwick, a forgotten and isolated outpost. The first month, John worked setting up the outpost, with only the company of his horse, Cisco, of a wolf which he named Two Socks because of its white paws, and his diary, in which he wrote down everything that happened. But it was here that the man came into contact with the Comanche people, and fascinated by their different culture, he immediately tried to establish a friendly relationship with them. Within a short time, the lieutenant became integrated into the tribe, dissociating himself from his old life. Here, he met very interesting figures, such as Kicking Beard, Wind in the Air, and 10 Bears, and succeeded in a short time in becoming a respectable member in the village. The story describes Native American culture in a detailed and sensitive way. The tribe also includes a young white woman who has been with them since childhood. The woman has the ability to act as an interpreter to establish a communication between the Sioux people and John. This story shows us an intercultural journey of the protagonist that completely transforms him. Thus, he is also able to discover his true essence in such a distant people. In principle, the story of the film is very similar to that of the book, because the author of the book was also the screenwriter of the film. As always, however, the book is more detailed than the film. The story tells about an intercultural encounter between the American host people and the tribes of the Indians, the true inhabitants of those pure and spoiled territories. The language, value system, religion, and culture of this you are characteristics that are completely incompatible with those of the settlers. Yet, a military man like Tambar, who having an open mind to learn about other cultures and being in love with nature, becoming friend with his neighbors, discovers some universal elements that make him feel more like family than he ever felt with his own people. Respect for nature, sacred place, animals, and pre-existing communities should not be different principle from culture to culture. That is why Dunbar finds a common language with the Sioux. Overcoming the fear of knowing the different, let's call it that. Perhaps this is one of the fundamental themes of this story that we still face every day in our daily lives. And war and discrimination are also themes that are highlighted, such as, for example, the cruelty of European settlers to destroy entire peoples, erasing so much cultural heritage that includes the language, religion, the habits, and traditions of Native Americans. Moreover, at the time, they were uncommon in stories and films, and if they were seen at all, they were usually the antagonists of the story, played by red-faced non-native actors and portrayed as barbaric and savage. This is the inaccurate representation of native people in Hollywood. Blake, and why not also Costner, succeeded in shedding new light on native by showing the richness of these peoples that is still being obscured to the whole world. Dances with Words is very important because it showed the whole world the cruel genocide of American Indians committed by a civilization that claimed the right to call itself a superior race, an ideal not very different from that of Nazism. But this is not seen by everyone in the same way. Who knows why? But everyone knows history is written by the victors. I personally choose this work because I've always been fascinated by Native American culture, and I find it so wrong that there is so little left of such an interesting culture. We live in a world of hypocrisy, where reason is always in the hands of those who have power.